Things seem to be a bit calmer at Westminster these days with Rishi Sunak as the new PM, but then it has only been a couple of days. And what can he do about soaring bills and wages and pensions not keeping up for our audience here in London and for all of you at home all around the country? Tonight we're in Dulwich in South London, an area that's been Labour for a long time and where people voted overwhelmingly to remain in the EU in 2016. And tonight we'll be talking about the new PM, the NHS, are protesters' right to throw cans of soup at priceless works of art, and is political satire dead? Tonight's panel from the new government, Lucy Frazer, Minister in the Department for Levelling Up as of yesterday. She was a barrister until moving into politics 7 years ago as MP for South East Cambridgeshire. For Labour, David Lammy, the Tottenham MP, is the Shadow Foreign Secretary. He previously served as Minister in the governments of Tony Blair and Gordon Brown and has written books on the London riots and tribalism in politics. Julia Hartley-Brewer hosts Talk TV's Breakfast Show. The columnist and journalist is well known for her forthright views on social, political and cultural affairs. And Armando Iannucci has a long list of film and TV writing credits to his name, including In the Loop, The Thick of It, and his current comedy series Avenue 5. He's perhaps best known for writing award-winning comedies about backstabbing and farce at the heart of Westminster. Need I say more? Good evening. Welcome to our panelists, welcome to our audience here, and we have you here in order to reflect the opinions of the nation, of course, the voting patterns of the nation as well. Very, very good to see you. And of course, welcome to you at home. Do join in the conversation the usual way on social media at BBC Question Time. Let's hear what you've got to say. OK, we'll take our first question tonight, and that is from Finola Gowers.
Can Rishi Sunak unite a fractious Tory party and bring stability to the government of this country?
Right, well, Lucy, as the newest person on the panel here, what's your answer to that?
Well, there's a very straightforward answer, and that's yes. And I think he's done that already. So his primary aim is to bring economic stability to the country, because from that all other policies flow. And we will see that when we have the fiscal statement on the 17th of November. But I think he's already stabilised the markets. I think he's brought the party together. I don't know whether any of you watched PMQs on Wednesday, but...
Prime Minister's questions.
Prime Minister's questions.
Not in the Westminster Village.
On Wednesday, you know, the time when, you know, there is the debate between him and the Leader of the Opposition. And I think what you saw behind him was a united party who wants to get on and deal with the issues that you have in the country, you know, get the economy back on track, you know, ensure that we spend money in our schools and our hospitals and that we deliver for you in the country.
Armando?
Well, here we are, day 2, and already we're talking about how long the Home Secretary is going to last. And it has been, I think, there's always a danger when you get a new Prime Minister, you think you're getting a new government, and you're not. That's not how the Constitution works. And in the reshuffle, we saw the same old faces coming in, some left, some good. So it's been like watching a giant tumble dryer go round. It's the same old faces. And it's very difficult for a Prime Minister to relaunch a government, because the Constitution just doesn't work that way. And I think part of the problem has been, over the last 10 years, we've given this role of Prime Minister a kind of presidential meaning to it, some all-powerful figure. And I think that's what the mistake Liz Truss made when she came into power, which is that she could change everything. So I think what we have now is someone who can at least string 2 sentences together and sound and look competent. But I think, you know, as the weeks go on, we'll see the government start to fray, because the same old people who have the same old attitudes to government, someone like Suella Braverman, who politicises every law and every aspect of the Home Office that she's meant to preside over, is not going to last that long.
And do you think she should stay in post? Suella Braverman, of course, was sacked under the previous Prime Minister, brief tenure, over breaching the serial code, over sending emails from a private email account and thereby breaching
And I'm told today the MI5 is teaching her what the principles of safety and security are and what she's allowed to email and what should be secure. Some people say that Rishi Sunak was naive in bringing her back to her post. But I just wonder if he's been very, very clever indeed in that he got the promise from her to support him, therefore he gets over the line as long as she gets to the Home Office, knowing that in 6 weeks' time, by the time she's, said that, tofu has to be criminalised as a Class A drug or whatever, and has to go, he's won, because he's then got rid of her.
Woman there, yes, in the black.
Oh, great. Just the original question to Lucy about Sunak uniting the party. Do you think that you need someone a little bit more relatable in terms of wealth to unite the nation?
Do you want to take that before I move on?
Yeah, look, I'm really proud of people who self-start. I'm really proud of people who get on in life and make money. I think that...
Should we just put it in context? Those who don't know, I mean, he's... whether you think this is relevant or not, this is a question you're asking. He's the wealthiest Prime Minister in history, and he and his wife's wealth, we can't be exactly sure, but it's reported to be something like 730 million.
I think that what you need to judge the Prime Minister on, and in fact any minister, is what they deliver for the country. And what Rishi delivered during the pandemic was supporting the economy, making sure that businesses didn't go under, making sure those who were vulnerable got support. So he delivered for the country. The IFS said that the package was one of the most comprehensive across the world. I think what he has delivered since he's been Prime Minister, it's only been a few days, is stabilising the market so that everybody can rest assured that although we're living in a world where cost of living is going up, the government will do whatever it can. And that's what you should be asking yourself. Is he going to deliver for me? Not what his private income is.
So it's therefore about what he does. But, last year or 2 years ago, the Town Fund put towns in 580 towns in order of their greatest need. This is part of the levelling up process.
And this was for money to go to towns.
And Rishi Sunak moved Conservative constituencies up the list. Hence that footage of him saying he took money away from inner cities and gave it to Tunbridge Wells.
I think what he was saying in relation to that was what the Labour government had done was give money to big urban areas. And in fact, disadvantage spreads across the country. And what we need to do is level up across the country. So some quite wealthy areas, actually there's deprivation within them as well. So what we need to do is not just level up in big cities, we need to level up across the country, and that's what he was doing.
Let me just come around the audience. There's lots of hands up. The woman in the very back, in the red top.
Hi, Lucy, just to go back to what you said about economic stability being reflected in stability in the markets, don't you think it's a little dangerous to tie the economic stability of the country to the markets when what might be beneficial for the markets is not necessarily beneficial for ordinary people, especially in a cost of living crisis?
Lucy, I'm going to come back to you, but I just want to come around a few more people first. Yes, and the woman further down in the glasses.
Oh, yeah. So Rishi Sunak has derived his legitimacy to govern from the 2019 mandate, and that was fought, a big issue for that was levelling up. But then at the same time, he says tough decisions need to be made economically to get us out of this mess. So is levelling up still going to happen, and how is it going to happen?
OK, well, given that's your department, we definitely want to come back to you on that. Let me just bring more of the panel in. Julia, so can Rishi Sunak unite his fractious party?
Well, I think he and his party will hope so. As he told his MPs, unite or die, those are the choices. I have to say, I do look forward to reading Suella Braverman's memoirs of her 6 days in the political wilderness. I think I'll make a post-it note. But the reality is, he brought a lot of people in, whether they were Trussites or Penny Mordaunt fans, or whether they wanted Boris Johnson back, because basically he wanted them to be, to paraphrase an American president, spitting out of the tent rather than spitting in. I'm thinking of you, Michael Gove. But the reality is, we need it to work. Whether you support the Tories, Rishi Sunak particular, or Labour, or anybody else, there isn't going to be a general election. Prime Ministers don't call general elections when they're 28 or 30 points behind in the polls, and we are in a dire crisis. I think we'd all be with Brenda from Bristol back in 2017. Oh no, not another one. There's too much politics, is what she had to say. And I think actually, when we're in the crisis that we're in, and it's not all created by Liz Truss, there's lots more reasons why we're in this crisis, for many different long-term reasons, and frankly, a plague on all of your houses on that front. The reality is we need to have this work, because we haven't got time to have a general election. We need to have some action to help people who are facing a really, really rough winter ahead.
David.
Well, let's be honest, Liz Truss was shocking. The bar is phenomenally low. It would be very hard for Rishi Sunak not to be moderately better. But I've got to say, I'm concerned that he's more focused on his party than the actual country. And the truth is, to wake up yet again to stories about breaches of the ministerial code. This is on the back of Boris's problems with the ministerial code, Priti Patel's problems with the ministerial code, Hancock's problem with the ministerial code. It just goes on and on and on. This is a serious office of state. And the only reason she's there is because she's in the pocket of the ERG. This country is bigger than just the ultra-right of the Conservative Party. So I suspect he's not going to be able to unite his party. And by the way, he didn't even get a mandate from his party's members. They rejected him in the summer. They didn't put it to them this time round because they thought that he'd get rejected again. Never mind a mandate for the people. So I'm afraid what we need is a general election. He's not going to cut it.
Where was Gordon Brown's mandate? Gordon Brown was in office for 3 years, no election. Where was Gordon Brown's mandate? I don't remember you shouting about that.
I remember the Tories running a campaign saying, vote Blair, get Brown. You and I know
and we did.
that he got a mandate, he put himself to the country, he was rejected, we moved on. But everyone knows that Blair and Brown governed broadly together for many, many years.
What should be the
completely different to three?
Boris and Rishi?
We've had 3 prime ministers in as many months.
OK, let's hear from our
chaos.
audience. The man there in the white shirt and the dark jacket, yeah.
What I'm looking at and what I'm worried about is, are we sacrificing ministerial competence in the name of party unity?
And what do you think?
I think we are, and I'm a paid Conservative Party member, and I wouldn't vote for them at the moment at all. I kind of echo what the MP Chris said the other week, and I'm actually almost horrified with the level of incompetence that the government has shown.
Are you talking about Charles Walker? I think, yes.
Charles Walker, not Chris, that we've seen from the party over the past basically 18 months, 2 years, and the factionalisation we've seen is not a solution, and handing out ministerial positions just so you can try and cobble things together for another few months isn't working.
OK. The man there in the blue shirt and the tie. Yeah.
I wonder if, given the events of this summer in the Conservative Party, whether Mr Iannucci will need a new baseline for omni-shambles.
And the man in the blue shirt further down with the glasses, yeah.
Yeah. I'd just like to know when politicians are going to actually put the country first, the party second, and themselves third. But at the moment, it would appear it's the other way around.
And do you feel that across the board for all parties, or one in particular?
What would that mean, though? What would that mean?
What does that mean? Surely they should have the best interests of the country uppermost in their minds, not themselves, not the party.
But in terms of policies, what would you
In
want?
terms of bickering between themselves, you need to pull together. If we're in a crisis, like we say we are, we need to pull together and pull all together and pull out of it.
I think it's OK, all right. Just 1 second. I just want to hear from the woman just in front. Yes, with the glasses, yeah.
I just feel, what do we think is more important right now? And this is to anyone on the panel. Is it stability or democracy? It follows on from what the gentleman has said behind me. That it's really important that we maybe think about having cross-party decisions when it comes to big things, such as COVID, war in Ukraine, now this cost of living crisis. Should it now not be a time for us to all come together from both sides of the House to sort out what's going on?
Parties used to be broad churches, but now the factions within those parties are no longer talking to each other, are no longer willing to compromise, which is why you have something like the ERG or the right and the left within parties not wanting to, it's all about trading positions off against each other.
But it was always like that. When wasn't it like that?
Let me come back to Lucy, because there are a number of questions coming to you, in particular from that young man at the back. But so 2 of the things, for example, that you were asked were: is it dangerous? You were saying, I think, at the back there, for to rely on to prioritise economic stability among the markets, and also, what about levelling up? And you should know, because I know you've only just you only got appointed last night, haven't you?
Even
but can levelling up continue if budgets are going to be cut? And then I just wonder what you say to the young man over there, you're a Conservative voter, but you're thoroughly unimpressed.
I would like to respond to all those points, but I think I might take up, and everything that everyone said. People have raised some really interesting points. Can I just actually start with the gentleman and then go to the questions that were specifically asked? The gentleman who said politicians need to start putting the country first. Can I just give you an example, because I think it's a really strong one, about a really incredible politician who put the country first and not his own interests very recently. So Rishi Sunak, our now Prime Minister, had a leadership contest. And at the outset of that leadership contest, he said, I'm going to tell you the truth. It's an uncomfortable truth, but I'm going to tell you it. And do you know what? Saying that was not in his interests, because that is not what the Conservative members wanted to hear. What they wanted to hear was about sunny uplands. And we know that because Liz Truss won. But even though the polling was saying that, and even though Rishi knew that at the start, he ran his campaign on honesty and levelling with the British public.
What about these other questions?
And that is a politician, I'll just come to just to finish this point, that is a politician who puts the country first. And I think we are very lucky to have him as Prime Minister.
Your party elected Liz Truss. Why did they elect Liz Truss? Because it was uppermost in most people's minds that she was not fit for office. So why did she get the office?
So that was a decision for party members. I supported Rishi Sunak.
Friends in places. You give me a job, I'll back you. Simple.
Well, I didn't have any of those discussions, and I'm sure many of my colleagues...
Very briefly, I just want to briefly move on to this, because then I'm going to take another question.
So economic stability is the heart of everything, because if we have economic stability, that's the foundation on which we can build all other policies. So if we have economic stability, if we have market stability, then we can support the most vulnerable, then we can give money to our schools. So I understand what you say, but I think economic stability is central to ensuring that we can do everything else. And just very briefly on levelling up...
Is that going to fall by the wayside along with other things if they're going to have to be cut?
No. I mean, I've done a meeting today, as I said, I've only been 24 hours in the job, but I had a meeting today across every portfolio, and levelling up is here to stay.
Right, you heard it here. OK, I'm going to move on, not because this isn't worth talking about, but you asked quite a lot of other questions as well, and I want to try to fit them all in. Before I do, I'm just going to tell you that Question Time will be in Horsham in West Sussex next week, and after that we are in Wells in the southwest. So if you want to come along and be part of those audiences, go to the Question Time website and you can follow the instructions there. And incidentally, the list of all our venues for this series is there, so you can sign up for any of those if they're in your area. That's at the BBC Question Time website. OK, let's take another question now from Dr. Aisha Dokrat.
Patients are not being discharged into the community due to social care crisis, leaving no beds for patients who need them. How is the government going to tackle this?
So, you're a doctor.
Yep.
What's your experience of this?
So, it affects me. I work in urgent care and I also work on 111 calls. There's a knock-on effect, I think, that a lot of people probably don't realise. For example, I have to, when I speak to a patient, if a patient needs to go to the hospital, I then have to decide whether I'm going to call an ambulance or not, because it can take up to 4 hours for an ambulance to arrive for a patient.
Well, even a patient that's seriously ill?
Even a patient that's seriously ill. Recently, we had a patient in urgent care who may have been having a heart attack. We waited 4 hours for an ambulance. And this knock-on effect...
4 hours?
4 hours. We had to wait 4 hours. And we have to ensure that the patient is stable, and we don't have all the facilities that an A&E department would have. So we had to wait 4 hours. And it's just a knock-on effect, because what's happening is the ambulances aren't able to offload their patients in A&E. And then A&E obviously have a full, they don't have any capacity. And they're not able to get the patients onto the wards. This also affects elective surgeries.
Because people aren't being discharged and then into social
exactly,
care.
They're not being discharged into social care. So the beds are being taken up in the hospitals. And with patients who don't actually need to probably, they don't need the hospital care. But there isn't any there aren't any...
There's nowhere else for
them to go. There's nowhere else for them to go.
And so when you're sitting with a patient, just since we've got you here, you're sitting with a patient for 4 hours who you think might be having a heart attack, which obviously is potentially fatal. What does that make you feel?
It makes us it upsets us, obviously, but it's also very stressful, because we have other patients that we need to see, so there's a backlog. But then what happens is we're worrying about this patient. We're having to monitor the patient. We have to have a triage nurse, or someone to be with the patient. It's very stressful. for us. We're having to make decisions which, you know, for example, it's just very stressful for us.
I can imagine. David?
It's desperate. Right across the NHS. You can't find an NHS dentist. I met a woman who's been waiting for an appointment at a bowel clinic for 18 months. The government's ambition is that you should see your GP within 2 weeks. We had a decade of cuts in the National Health Service, and now as a consequence of the black hole that they gave us, they're talking about further austerity in public services. The NHS is on its knees. Nurses are leaving because they want a less stressful life. They're having to take their own kids to food banks. It is desperate. And this is the 6th richest economy in the world. And I hope when we get that next general election, Lucy, your party will be held to account for what you've done for the National Health Service.
Julia?
There's no doubt at all the NHS is in crisis. There are about 8 million people waiting for operations at the current time. A report this week showing that 7 out of 10 NHS trusts have longer than 2-week waits from when someone very anxious goes to the GP and then gets referred to actually see someone in hospital. The NHS is really good at lots of things. The one thing it's not really good at is saving lives. Unfortunately, we have some very bad metrics on that front if you've got any serious diseases. And a lot of that, I think you're quite right, is long term. It's not been, look, it's not had funding. It's funding even when there was austerity under Cameron. It did go up, but it didn't go up by as much as it gone up under Blair and Brown. That is a simple fact. And at the same time, people were getting older and people were getting fatter and they needed more healthcare. So in that respect, it was but what the doctor just mentioned there, this big issue about bed blocking. It's a horrible term, but basically 1 in 7 patients in our hospitals right now don't need to be there. They are elderly often, they need to be somewhere else, and those beds be freed up. And as you say, there's a knock-on effect for all the hospital wards, all the way back to A&E, all the way back to getting an ambulance. And you expressed surprise at a 4-hour wait. A member of my family who had an accident was told it would be a 6-hour wait, and he had a broken pelvis, which has I'm told, a 25% death rate. So that is the dire state we're in. But here's an idea. Maybe it would be a good idea not to have sacked 40,000 social care workers who worked the whole way through the pandemic because they didn't choose to get the vaccine. I believe in personal bodily autonomy, and that shouldn't have happened. But also, if you're going to have a national insurance rise to pay for social care, maybe give some of that money to social care. We are not going to fix anything in our NHS until we actually start paying care workers properly, funding care homes properly, and funding the people who are actually giving the care in people's homes that not only allows them to leave hospital when they've had their treatment, but also not to go into hospital in the first place. It is a Cinderella service, and it's about time we actually started spending the money on the social care. It's not glamorous, it's not a big glamorous hospital or a new cancer unit, but it will actually save lives.
I know you want to come again. Let me just get around the audience a little bit. The woman here in the purple jacket.
Thank you. As someone who has been left disabled by long COVID, I was completely fit and healthy before, and now my life as I knew it is unrecognisable. I'm not getting appointments, I'm not getting the help. My GP actually says long COVID clinics are a myth. What we need is multidisciplinary places where you can go, where you can get help. It's just not happening.
And so how's it affecting you?
I mean, at my worst, I mean, as you saw, I came in a wheelchair. I'm pushing myself to do what I can, but it affects, it's a blood disease that stops the oxygen getting around your body, which affects any or all of your organs. The press keeps saying it's a respiratory disease. In older people, it tends to be more often respiratory, but in younger people, it tends more often to be heart or other stuff. So you're seeing increased numbers of heart attacks, things like that. And it is so urgent. People are being left with no help. When you're alone, you don't have a carer, you don't have the help that you need, you are just stuck in bed. You're not able to do the things you do. I'm actually a founding member of a charity called Long COVID Support. We've been desperately trying to do what we can to help and support people where we can, reading all the peer research papers that are out there, trying to learn, trying to share that information.
But where is the
support from the experts?
Right, you're not
you know,
getting support.
because that's not, we're the ill people. You know, we're doing our own, you know, we're being the most resilient you can be. And so I have met the most resilient people I've met in my life through this. But we need help. And the constant underfunding of the NHS across the board is disgusting. People are dying. People are killing themselves because they don't want to live a disabled life. And that's another issue. The fact that disabled people are looked less than. You know, we're hardworking, we want to work, we want to get on with our lives. I didn't choose to suddenly stop.
Okay, I'm really sorry to hear about your experiences, I must say. Lucy, the question that Dr. Aisha was asking originally is in terms of social care and the knock-on impact of the lack of social care and people being stuck in hospital. Now, one of the things that Rishi Sunak, one of his big ideas was the national insurance rise, and of course the social care levy coming out of that. We're not seeing that now. So what happened to that idea, and how else are we going to pay for it?
So I think the lady's right to identify that we have backlogs. I think everyone accepts that we had a pandemic and that has pushed the backlogs even further. But to say that we're not funding the NHS isn't accurate.
No, but I'm simply saying that the Prime Minister, when he was Chancellor, came up with this idea, the social care levy. That idea is now gone.
It has gone. We passed the legislation.
So how is it going to happen?
But there will still be money for social care.
It's just going to come from some other pot.
Significant money for social care, separate to... there's significant record sums going into the NHS. An increase in the last spending review to NHS funding.
Because it would have raised 13 billion a year, so that's going to come from somewhere else.
I'm sure we'll hear about spending commitments in the spending review and on the 17th of November. But there are many ways of treating people. So, we have committed money to diagnostic centres. We've got 40 new hospitals. Unfortunately, or fortunately...
We haven't got 40 new hospitals. That's a load of nonsense.
There are so many different ways.
So did you just say we have 40 new hospitals?
There is a commitment to do 40.
Because we don't have 40. Julia's right about that.
It's not even new hospitals. Some of it's just a refurbished existing hospital.
This is just nonsense. There are no 40 new hospitals, and you cannot cut local authority budgets by up to 40% and expect people not to get out of hospital. They've got nowhere to go. That's why we've got a social care crisis. So it's not just
we're
the
investing.
NHS.
You can get really angry about it, David, but we're investing.
We should be really angry about it.
We're investing significant funds into the NHS, and we're investing significant funds into social care. But of course, the population is getting older. People need and can receive more support, and they are getting that. We absolutely recognise that there are issues. We absolutely recognise that there are backlogs, and we're committed to dealing with those. But I'm not going to pretend that there are easy answers to these very difficult questions.
I think part of the problem, right, Rishi Sunak says we don't need an election because he's standing by the 2019 manifesto. Now, the manifesto, the Tory manifesto, made a very, very specific commitment to ring-fencing a pot of money for social care. That's the first thing Boris Johnson said on the steps of Downing Street when he came in. I'm going to sort social care out. This has been a cast-iron guaranteed commitment. And we thought we had it with national insurance. The fact that that's been taken away and not replaced by anything of such significance is the problem, because it means that the backlog that everyone is talking about is just going to remain. People are stuck in hospitals because they don't have a social care plan in place to get out. And the other thing, I'm going to mention the B word in a minute, Brexit. The other thing that is the problem is the vast number of vacancies within hospitals and within social care. We need actually to encourage more people to come here to take up those posts, fully qualified people. Otherwise, this backlog isn't going to get cleared.
There's a lot of hands up. I just want to get around quite a few if I can. The woman in the yellow and black dress and the glasses, yeah.
So I'm a consultant psychiatrist, and there's something I need to let you know, Lucy, which is this. In mental health care, we've been chronically underfunded by 55% for years. We have a massive workforce crisis. Junior doctors are leaving, they're demoralised. 40% of them want to leave, not just the NHS, which actually, Julia, is one of the best health services in the country, in the world.
Apart from for saving lives?
Well, it's a very, very, very good health service, but we have been chronically underfunded. They want to leave. They don't just want to leave the NHS, they want to leave the country. And because they are some of the most highly trained doctors in the world, people are begging for them. Senior psychiatrists and senior doctors like myself, we have to retire because we're getting pension tax penalties. And then our facilities are just not up to scratch. They're just not. And it means that we can't provide the care that we are trained to do. We don't need lots of new hospitals. We need new facilities. We need facilities to be enhanced and improved. But what we really need is for people to accept that there is more demand now than ever because of the pandemic. We know that mental health conditions affect 75% of them start before the age of 25. If we do not help people, if we cannot provide, something to narrow that treatment gap, then unfortunately we're going to have a whole heap of adults who aren't able to achieve their potential. They're not going to be able to contribute to the economy, and it means that we're not going to get economic stability, never mind economic growth.
Okay. Man here in the glasses.
Thank you. Firstly, completely agree what's happening to the Maudsley is horrific. That transforms over into teaching as well as the mental health does affect the children. My question is for you, unfortunately. I don't see the figures. So obviously you sort of the 17th of November for the figures to come out. So a simple question which you must know is what was the last budget allocation to the NHS? So we can all see what it will be for this potential 40 new hospitals, etc., on the 13th of November. From what you're saying, it should be increased significantly and should be allocated to the NHS. Do you know what the last figures were?
I'm not sure if it's entirely fair to ask you off the top of your head if you know what the last figure was, given that's not your department.
Is it lower or higher? That's simpler.
I mean, don't forget there's inflation, of course, taken into account as well. So sometimes when politicians talk about the budget getting bigger, often it's because of inflation. It's not necessarily just because they've been given more money in real terms.
What I can tell you is that every single department in the last spending review got an increase in its budget. And so the NHS...
In real terms?
The NHS got an increase in its budget.
In real terms? Because that's what matters.
Yeah, of course that's what matters. But I can't tell the gentleman what's going to be in the spending review, and therefore whether it's going to go up or it's going to go down. But we have invested significant amounts.
But we're now reading that every department's been asked to look at 10 to 15% cuts in its budget or savings in its budget.
Well, you are reading that, but let's wait for the announcement.
Let's hear a bit more from audience. This woman here in the front.
I would just like to say I retired from medicine 10 years ago.
Gosh, we are well served for NHS practitioners here.
And I think that not an awful lot has changed with bed blockers, because we were having to cancel elective surgery patients because we couldn't get patients home.
And this is what did you say, 15 years ago?
10 years ago. I
Sorry,
retired 10 years ago, and this happened before. And a lot of the problem actually came with the private financial initiatives for the new hospitals. And I've only just heard this week where I live, they're shutting a community hospital that had 2 wards, 10 beds in each ward. So where are the patients going to go who have had hips and need rehabilitation if they can't go home? So nothing has changed in the last 10 years, actually.
And the woman at the very back with the blonde hair.
Are the Tory government truly committed to a national health service, and how do we believe you if you are?
Okay, I'll come back to Lucy on that. And the man in the blue sweater there. Yes, you.
So I also work for the NHS.
Oh my goodness, I don't know how this has happened.
And obviously it's incredibly underfunded and massively understaffed, and staff morale throughout the service is at an all-time low, I would say.
And why is that?
Underfunding, overworked, long hours, and actually I think a lack of appreciation in many areas. And I'd just like to ask Julia what you meant by the NHS is very good at everything except saving lives.
On an awful lot of the metrics, the NHS is really, really successful. Per pound spent, we have really, really good outcomes in this country. Sadly, when it comes to actually saving lives, because of the delays we've got, and completely accept the issues over cuts and staffing and morale and all of that and the long-term issues.
You're talking about things like cancer outcomes?
Yeah, but everything, across the board. Heart disease, diabetes, cancer, pretty much everything. We actually have much higher death rates. Your chance of survival of the biggest diseases in the world are lower in this country than most comparable European countries. And that is a reality. Now, there are different systems, there are different amounts of money we spend. It's actually, weirdly, quite an efficient health service per pound spent. but we're not getting the outcomes we need. The sort of waiting list that we have in this country for getting to see a consultant if you've got suspected cancer or heart disease or diabetes, they are unheard of in large parts of the Western world.
That means it's a resources issue. It's not a care quality issue. It's to do with resources and funding.
There are some other countries that have similar outcomes, have similar spending as a percentage of GDP, but actually have better outcomes.
Yes, but
I think we should be open-minded about what would be the best way of running our health.
Yes, but you're not maligning the quality of care that you get in the NHS. It's the lack of resources.
Not maligning anyone. My mother was an NHS GP. I'm not maligning anyone working in the NHS. It's getting to the point of actually getting treated. The longer you wait till you get treated, the less chance you have of living.
Okay, there's so many hands up. I'm going to take a couple more. Yes, the woman in the front here in the glasses, in the dark sweater.
So, Jeremy Hunt was responsible for a lot of the cuts and efficiency savings that were done at the NHS, and now he's our Chancellor. So is the NHS really safe?
Okay, that's the second question, is the NHS safe? It's the woman in the white shirt with the glasses there. Don't tell me you work in the NHS as well.
No, I'm education actually, and I don't know about the NHS budget, but I do know the education budget will not be back up to 2010 levels in real terms. So you can't say you've added more money to the budget when, in real terms, with inflation, energy rises, salary increases, 90% of schools are reporting they will run out of money next year. It's an absolute crisis. We're also suffering recruitment issues. Something drastically has to happen, and we're being told, education, our fifth education secretary in the last year, being told that they're also going to have to make cuts in the education budget. It is just not possible. And levelling up, you're the levelling up secretary, the answer to levelling up is the answer around that and social justice and tackling the disadvantage gap starts with education. It needs to be a priority, absolutely. And I can't help wondering, and I know we're in a private school here, that if more of the Conservative Party children went to state schools, they'd care about it a lot more.
Okay, now, there's a lot in that, but you've been asked twice now, is the NHS safe in the Conservative government's hands?
No.
Yes, and let me answer another question, which
was,
how do we know? Well, the answer is yes, but another lady asked,
it sounds like they need a bit of persuading.
Okay, and they said, how do we know? So I would say, judge us on what we say and on what we do. So we have consistently talked about the importance of the NHS. We've consistently said we will preserve and safeguard the NHS. But what have we done? We have also put record funding into the NHS, and we can't run hospitals. So hospitals are run by the NHS. They're not run by the government or by ministers. And we need to ensure that those are run well and continue to improve them. We are going to have to make some difficult decisions in the budget, and the government doesn't have any money other than your money, and we do need to balance the books, and we do need to get to a position of fiscal responsibility. But I can absolutely assure you that schools, one of the reasons I went into politics, because I believe every child should have every opportunity across the country, and we should ensure that they have fulfilling lives. Education and healthcare are absolutely at the top of our agenda.
I just hope that we can get back to a politics that isn't just about sound bites. I've been in politics 22 years. You get these lines, we put record funding in. What does record funding really mean? If you know in real terms there's been a cut, and there has been a cut. And actually in the NHS, you also had the botched Lansley reforms that messed up a system that was working very well in 2010.
He was a previous Health Secretary, Andrew Lansley.
Yeah, so we've had 12 years of this. And it's not working. We went from a 4-hour wait in A&E. Now you can be waiting 12 hours. And if you ring 999, you might not get an ambulance. You've got to get there yourself. That's happened on your watch. The gap between children in state schools and those in private schools has grown. It's grown in terms of the average cost of a pupil in a state school in London is about £8,000. If you go to a posh public school, it's about 43,000. That's unacceptable. You've done nothing about it. Nothing. And you've had 12 years. And you sit there with record, significant funds. Record means nothing. Significant means nothing. What's happened is a cut, a real terms cut in the life chances of British people and British children.
Can I just respond?
briefly, turn on you.
So the basic standards of education, judged by OECD standards, in terms of underlying numeracy and literacy, have gone up under this government, under the reforms that Michael Gove put in that were then implemented by successive secretaries of state. So more people have gone to university. University is not totally the answer, so we also need to improve technical education. There was an announcement on technical education today because we absolutely need to ensure that this country is ready and has the skills
Have you
for
been
the
to an
future.
FE college recently?
I have many.
Has been cut to the bone. Look what you've done to adult learning. Where are the night schools? Skills are falling apart.
Well, there's an adult skills lifetime guarantee brought in on education for adults.
Can I just say how frustrating it is to have people sitting here who happily locked children in their homes, in their bedrooms for the best part of 18 months, telling me that they care about poor children's education.
Okay, Julia.
You're an outrage, both of you, an outrage.
Right. Loads of you got your hands up, but as I say, I want to try and get around the questions that you submitted when you arrived here this evening. So I'm going to come to another one from Bajina Jelak, if I pronounced that right, I hope so.
Well done. Are Just Stop Oil latest protests heading their own course?
So let's just remind ourselves, so Just Stop Oil members, and they are a group that basically want to stop new licences and production of fossil fuels in this country. They threw, I think it was tomato soup, at the Van Gogh sunflowers. They glued themselves to roads, targeted luxury car showrooms. I think they put some cream cake or something like that over King Charles's waxwork at Two Swords. Armando.
I'm always very, very nervous about endorsing or even listening to someone advocating even more bans on protests. I mean, what this campaign did, if it transgressed the law, they'll get charged. The laws are in place.
But is it hurting their cause? That's Virginia's question.
Well, if they're smart, they'll soon stop, because I think it's worked because we're all talking about it and they've made their point. If they're smart, they'll move on to some other clever way of making their point. And I would like to cut them some slack, especially younger people, because, you know, the report came out today from the UN saying it's too late. Climate change, we've left it too late. We've got Rishi Sunak deciding not to go to the climate conference in Egypt. You know, and growing up as a teenager or a 20-something, thinking this is what we've passed on to them, it's no wonder they are frustrated, they're angry, they're confused, they're annoyed, they want to do something imaginative and bold. Yes, it's annoying, and I'm sure I'd lose my patience with them if I kept being stopped. But you know, if we have, as we have at the moment, a Home Secretary who decides that everything is political and that you have to then introduce boutique laws specifically designed to ban a particular type of protest, then I think we're on a slippery slope. I mean, look what's happening in Moscow and in Russia. We don't want that. We have laws here. If people transgress them, if people are causing obstruction, then they'll be charged. But the idea that we can't protest, there's a new law saying that we mustn't make noise when we protest. It's a protest. Noise is part of the definition. So I'm very, very reluctant about advocating any further kind of restrictions on how people behave like that.
Julia.
I do think they're harming their cause. I completely disagree with you, Armando. I don't think they do have a just cause. I don't want to just stop oil. I want to keep oil. I want to keep gas and fossil fuels. The reason why we live the lives we do in the West in the 21st century is, thank God, for fossil fuels, which delivered the Industrial Revolution. I would like that Industrial Revolution delivered to everyone around the world, the billions of people who survive on, you know, a couple of dollars a day and are scrabbling around to make a life for themselves and keep their children alive.
So, Julia, when you've got the UN saying, as Armando was referring to, that there's no credible pathway now
it's
to
a complete
reach
load of nonsense. That's not backed up by the latest IPCC.
Okay, well, listen,
it is
I
a load of nonsense.
Maybe you know better than the UN. This is what the UN are saying, and that the current policies may lead to 2.8 degrees warming this century.
Those climate models have been exposed as complete nonsense again and again and again. They are the most extreme end of the scientific models contained in those IPCC reports. But the point is, even if it were true, even if it were, would that necessarily be an issue? But that's aside the point from the kind of protests we're seeing. Because I think the issue here is you've got a lot of very entitled middle-class people who've led a very nice life.
Do we know they're middle-class people?
They pretty much are, actually, yes. I think we do. They want to stop other people living good lives.
Yeah.
If you want
have
to
you been
have,
checking them out individually,
if you want to have limits on people's ability to access fuel, you want to make it more expensive to get a plane abroad, to use a car, to heat your home, you are going to be harming poorer people, and you're going to be harming poorer people in the developing world. In my view, these people are not just, well, I think they're tantruming toddlers who've clearly never been told no by their parents. I think it's time we told them no. I think they are deeply, deeply immoral in what they're doing.
It's the developing world that's saying this has got to stop.
The world isn't saying
it's the
this.
developing world that's saying we're on fire.
They're really not. The world is not on fire, and the world is not going to die, and we're not going to die. This is catastrophising stuff that is not actually in the scientific sections of the IPCC reports. It's not.
And there wasn't a pandemic.
No, hang on.
Sorry. Of course there was a pandemic. Of course there was a pandemic.
Science is all subjective, and it's...
No, science should be objective, which is why we shouldn't have politicised statements about science.
99.9% of the science tells us that the climate is facing an utter catastrophe if it hasn't started already.
It literally doesn't. You should read some of the scientific reports. They don't back up those political statements. They don't.
Very, very sadly, because of this point of view in the Conservative Party.
I'm not in the Conservative Party.
No, but because of the point of view that exists, our Prime Minister announced today that despite us chairing COP, he will not be going to the next COP in Egypt. And that's why these young people are on the street. And can I say, I long for a Labour government, if only for one thing, because we will not be granting new licences for oil and gas.
Great.
Because we're serious.
And we can all be cold. And we can all be cold in the winter.
And look, I remember protesting when I was young against apartheid. I remember protesting against the poll tax. We are a mature democracy defending freedom in Europe. Of course, there must be a right to protest. We don't need any more laws. Absolutely right, the laws exist. I don't personally support stopping ambulances being able to get down the road and you know, cementing yourself to the ground and that sort of thing. But the right to protest must be sacrosanct in a civilised democracy, and we should not let them take it away.
All right, let's a lot of hands up. Woman there in the blue top, yes.
I almost don't want to give credence to what Julia said, because I think a lot of us here do not believe it.
Well, in that case, it must be wrong.
I'm interested to know if you want to live in a world with fossil fuels, the sort of lives that your children and children's
100%.
children are going to lead, if that's the case. I think my question is more, what do the panel think is the best way to, given that Rishi Sunak is not attending COP, given that the UN report said that there's no credible pathway to get below 1.5, how do we incentivise politicians to think long-term and not focus on short-term party political infighting and actually focus on the things that are really, really going to affect our generations?
Okay, woman here in the stripy t-shirt at the front.
I think it's a bit ridiculous to say that climate change is not as bad as it is, because did we not all experience this summer where we got 40-degree heat? That's unheard of. And also the floods that have been happening in Pakistan, 30 million people displaced.
30 years ago as well.
Yeah, climate refugees is that's in our future. It's really immediate, and I think this summer should have shown everybody that we thought maybe it's going to be in a few 30 years time, 2050, but it's happening right now, and I think we really need to take action.
It's called weather.
Woman. Julia, you know that the consensus of you know that the consensus of scientists, these things are happening more often. I mean, I don't think that is in dispute.
Actually, the IPCC report
past 5 years, hottest on record, for example.
There is actually not consensus on the idea that actually a lot of these extreme weather events are happening more often.
Okay, I'll leave that with you.
They're not.
We're here in the stripy top.
They're not. I can send you the data.
Let's listen.
Firstly, I find your denial shocking, and I find your judgment, which is pretty ignorant on people who protest, very insulting, actually, as someone who's protested all my life. And it is a human right that we must not. It's a democratic human right.
Yeah, I support your right to protest.
Great. But your judgment of who I'm definitely working class, and it's quite insulting that you think. Anyway. To get to my point, I'm going to be going to a demonstration on Saturday, the March of the Mummies, and I'm wondering if I'm likely, possibly in anything up to 5 years' time, to get a tag for having gone to the march, because that's apparently on the cards and scarily
You're talking about the public order bill, which is going through at the moment.
Yeah.
Well, let's ask the person we have here from the government. So Lucy, the question. Let's get back to the original one, which is: are Just Stop Oil's latest protests hurting their own cause? But then also we've heard a lot about legal disincentive to protest at all. And how do we incentivise politicians to think long term when we've got Rishi Sunak, for example, not going to COP27?
So lots of points there. So I think it's absolutely right that people should have a voice. They should be able to express their voice. They should be able to campaign and bring things to the attention of decision makers. As an MP, people are writing to me the whole time with their campaigns and bringing them to my attention. And I think that is part of living in a democracy, and I welcome it. But I do think that when campaigners start to disrupt businesses going about their work, building the economy, when they disrupt people. We've all talked about ambulances and 4-hour waits and our NHS, disrupting ambulances, getting sick people to hospital, stopping people going to school, then I think there's a problem, and I think that we need to act and tackle that. Now, the reason is that the government is absolutely listening to the issue of climate change. It's not just listening, it's acted on it. So we were one of the first major countries to legislate for net zero by 2050.
So why is the Prime Minister not going to COP27?
Well, I'll come on to that. So we have reduced our carbon emissions by 40% since 1990, faster than any other Western country. And so we are acting. So we hear and we're acting on it. To come on to the point about the Prime Minister, I think the UK has been leading in this sphere, not just in COP when we held the presidency, but overall. And in fact, the Prime Minister, when he was Chancellor, led on this issue as well. He brought together financial institutions, and he's committed to the UK being the world's first net zero financial centre. So he is absolutely on this issue.
Why is he not going? Let's just get to that.
He's not going because at the moment we've discussed and highlighted that we've got a fiscal statement on the 17th of November. Obviously he needs to prepare for that so that we have domestic stability. But I can assure you that government ministers across the board at all levels of seniority will be attending COP. As a transport minister, I involved in my portfolio as of 2 days ago was decarbonisation of transport and the future of transport, and I was going to attend COP. And I am sure there will be ministers at every level attending COP, as well as Alok Sharma, our COP president. I don't think the fact that the Prime Minister himself isn't going in any way diminishes our commitment.
But it's the message it sends, because if we were the president, people look to us to set an example. So if he's saying, no, I'm not going because it's not quite high enough in my entry. If Alok Sharma, I think today was told he no longer needs to attend, is allowed to attend cabinet. So that's a diminishing of his role. In the election campaigns they had over the summer, Liz Truss was talking about, banning solar panels in fields. And he was talking about banning wind power out in the sea. I think those positions have now been reversed. But it's the message, the signals these send out, which is that they're sending out confused signals about how high a priority they give to this.
OK, let me move on. I'm going to take one more question, which we've just about got time. We've got 4 or 5 minutes left on the programme. And having you here on the panel, Armando, seemed remiss if we didn't take this question. So, Anton Kravchenko.
Right. Mr. Iannucci, if The Thick of It were written today, would it be even funnier, or would it just be not funny at all?
Fortunately, I'm not writing The Thick of It today. Look, if we wrote an episode where we got through 3 prime ministers in 3 months and 5 education secretaries, and there must be, I'm sure there's someone who wakes up today not knowing and not remembering whether or not they're the health secretary, because everything's been so fast. If Suella Braverman goes, you know, I pity poor Grant Shapps, who was Home Secretary for 1 week. I think in the thick of it, he'd be presented with a Swiss clock, you know, when on the hour, a woman comes out and a man comes in, and a woman comes out and a man comes in, one of those things. I think, you know, I'm glad we stopped 10 years ago. It was seen as a warning, not a prediction. I'd like to change that now. I wish I could write something which all is well, but I'm not minded to do so at the moment.
And Julia, there's been a lot of talk, given there has been so much churn and so much instability recently, about have we got a lesser class of politicians now than we used to, or are we just nostalgic about the old days and we always think that things have changed?
I think people now go into politics straight from university. They become members of a think tank. This is what the Think of It picked up on, the way the country's run by lots of 24-year-olds who've got degrees in PPE from Oxford and then have become a researcher for an MP, and then joined a think tank and then become an MP themselves, and, you know, are devising furlough schemes at the age of 32.
Yeah, I know that's not true for you. Let me just ask you, I'll come to you, Lucy, hang on.
I mean, what are politicians uniquely now about? I mean, I think political satire is dead. I think we can safely say that. I'm going to say something that's going to be among the many unpopular things I've said tonight. And I include both the politicians here, and actually most of the politicians I've met. I've been working in political world for about 25 years. Actually, most politicians go into politics to try and make the country better. We may disagree with what they want to do a lot of the time. We may not like their policies. We may not like their personalities a lot of the time. But actually, I think most politicians are actually quite good people. Not all of them. Goodness me, there are some horrors. But most politicians, and you know, we may not agree on many policies, but no, I mean, I'm right, you're right. No,
I don't think so.
But this is the key thing, is that actually most politicians, I think, are trying to do the right thing. And I do think we get the politicians we deserve.
We get the politicians we deserve, David.
I think something has happened in the UK. David Cameron asked me to lead a review on the criminal justice system. It was a cross-party moment that put the issues of race above the day-to-day of politics. Something has happened, frankly, since we had that vote to leave the European Union, and social media and all the rest of it. It does make things like the thick of it seem, you know, you couldn't do them today, because it's just, when you've got a Home Secretary saying, I can't wait to get on the front of the Telegraph with, I sent them back. I sent them across. Or you've got a Home Secretary who's bullying. It's just sort of endless every single day, over and over and over again. And I'd love to get back to a stage where we normalise the tone, where we could agree on some things and make them happen. And it wasn't just silly sound bites.
Well, we don't call politicians scum.
There was actual action.
Your deputy party leader called Tories scum.
To deliver for the people. That's what I want.
Lucy.
So I think that politicians are derided quite a lot. I'd just like to mention...
And how does that feel as a politician? I mean, I'm not being in any sense having a go at you, but I genuinely want to know how that feels.
It's not great to be doing a job that you've chosen to do, as Julia said, to help people. And people don't understand that. But I get it, I totally get it. But I'd just like to, you know, my colleagues on my side, and I'm sure on the Labour benches as well, have come from a wide variety of backgrounds. So I was a barrister for 17 years before I became an MP. But we have doctors, we have nurses, we have small business owners, we have a postman, we've got someone who was in a band and a hairdresser, a lot of people who served in the forces. We have a wide variety of expertise that represents the whole of the UK. And I think that's a fantastic thing. And I would also like to end on a positive note, because I do think that we now have a government that is serious. I think it's much more stable, that is going to stabilise the economy. And I must say, to give credit to the Labour Party, I just think Prime Minister's questions that we had on Wednesday, you know, there was a serious debate across the House, and I've got an optimistic outlook for the future.
Right, optimism has broken out on the panel here at Question Time. That doesn't happen very often. Our hour is up. Thank you very much to the panel for coming here this evening. Thank you to our audience here in Dulwich. Great to see you. And of course, thank you to you at home for watching. If you can't stay up late to watch us on BBC One, we are always on the iPlayer at 8 o'clock now, so you can watch it then. Otherwise, from Question Time here in Dulwich. Bye-bye.